If you're like most people, you have lost someone in life, and they very likely have a gravesite. Um, and also, if you are like me, at least, and most people, visiting the gravesite is probably hard, for emotional reasons, obviously. Um, if you stick around today, we are going to use EFT tapping to work through some of the emotional difficulty. My story is that I lost a baby at a very young age. I was 17, and the baby lived for about 7.5 hours. And it was just, obviously, it was a very, very tragic, difficult time in my life. And this was in 2001. So it's been almost 24 years, and visiting the gravesite is still really hard for me. I've done a lot of inner work to process the grief, and some of it's still there. I still have some work to do, but visiting the gravesite is, it's not very far from my home, but visiting it it feels so overwhelming. It feels really heavy, and I don't want it to be like that. So today I'm going to use EFT tapping, show you how I use EFT tapping in this aspect of my life. Some of the things that I struggle with are, what do I do once I get there? Obviously it's okay to cry, but what if I don't cry? What if I do cry? What if somebody else is also visiting the grave, and then there's that added pressure. How do I act when I get there? What do I say? Do I say anything? And it's just all of this stuff. Maybe you have the answers, maybe you don't have the answers, but the truth is, logically, I know that the truth is however I act is perfectly fine and perfectly normal, or however I react is perfectly fine and perfectly normal. But it doesn't necessarily just remove the discomfort and the anxiety around it. So we'll do a quick round of tapping here. I am parked, just pointing that out for safety purposes. Please don't tap while you drive. But yeah, so I'll go through a little round, and you let me know if this resonates with you. So again, this is getting ready to travel to the cemetery to put this little flower that I like to put on the gravesite in the spring. I don't always do it because sometimes I can't go, but then I have a second one that I put outside of my own home, and I'm determined to do it this year. It's on my heart, and I really, really want to do it. Like I said, it's been 24 years, and I'm just ready for it to, I don't want to say be over it, because it's not something that you'll ever be truly over, but I'm ready for it to feel a little easier and a little lighter, and maybe even get some, I don't know if closure is the right word, but here we go. So, feeling really anxious about visiting Gabby's grave, and I really want to go, but I'm not sure how to act. I'm not sure how my mind and body will react, but I want to do it anyway. And I choose to honor however I feel and whatever emotions may come up. Going to Gabby's grave today, and I haven't been there in a while, and it feels a little uncomfortable. I feel some anxiety and some discomfort. I don't really know how to act when I'm there. I don't know if I should say words. I don't know if I should just be silent. Things I've done in the past include just sitting there, maybe talking to her. I've taken the time to journal while I was there and just reflect on what I was feeling at the time. And logically, I know that however I respond is absolutely fine. But emotionally, I still feel some anxiety. I feel some discomfort. I'm afraid that all of those really hard emotions are going to come flooding back. And it's going to feel like the day that we buried her. And obviously, that was not a fun day. I don't really care to invite pain into my life, but she obviously was a really big part of my life, even though her own life was so short. So I am going to allow myself to make this trip and spend whatever amount of time I'm able to spend. Allow myself to just feel and just be and just honor that she was alive at one point, and just allow it to symbolize that she is very loved and very missed, and she always will be. So just allowing myself to breathe. Not to stuff the emotions down, but again, to honor them. And just allowing this tapping to make the journey a little less heavy. And so, here we go. I've been wanting to come to her gravesite for quite a while. For a few weeks anyway. I've been thinking about it. I try to come at least once a year. It doesn't always happen, although sometimes it's more than that. More often than that. And I think part of my, I don't know if hesitancy is the right word, but part of what I'm feeling is maybe some guilt. Do I, feel like I should stay longer or, visit more often? But also like to point out that it's not so much the words when you are tapping, it's more the tapping itself, and the words are helpful, I think. But even if you don't know exactly what to say, just the thoughts that are going through your head are enough to let the tapping do its thing. It's enough to allow yourself to process whatever it is that you're feeling. Again, even if you can't put it directly into words. Some other things, or some other reasons that I don't always visit the grave. I like to go by myself, and I think the reason is kind of what I already mentioned, that I don't always know how to act. I didn't know how to react or behave on the day of her funeral when I was 17 years old, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. And I didn't, there were people, I don't know if it's called like a receiving line, I don't know the correct terminology, but where the father and I and the grandparents are sitting in the front row, or I know I was, I'm assuming the rest is correct. Certain parts are very clear, but I'm just sitting there, and there are people walking by and telling us how sorry they are for our loss, and they're trying to send condolences and just find the right words to say, to, not that there's anything they could say to take that kind of pain away, but here's the turn where it gets hard. But yeah, so just I remember sitting in the chair alongside the cemetery, or alongside the grave site, and people walking past and just offering hugs and handshakes, and I didn't know how to react. I would try to just like smile and give I would nod and maybe give a little smile. And somebody pointed out that I was smiling, and I wasn't like smiling in celebration. It was just that I didn't know how to react. I was 17 years old going through this very tragic thing. And I, looking back, was most definitely in shock. You know, it was dissociating and all kinds of things. So it feels like when I go here that memory is still very much there. I don't, I feel like I can't look at the camera right now, but it was just like a little, just as a way to say thank you for their kind words. And I guess it was, misunderstood on some levels. And the person that said it probably doesn't even remember they said it. But I definitely remember it, because it made me feel even more off. I was already a 17-year-old girl who got pregnant as a junior in high school. Now, so ostracized, everybody thinking that I'm this loose girl, which was not the case at all. People thinking that I'm this loose girl, so having to show up at school as the pregnant girl. And now I lose the baby. So life feels all kinds of unfair and ridiculous, if I'm being honest. And I didn't know how to react. And I so very badly wish that I had known about tapping then. Because I do feel like it would have made a huge difference in how all of this played out. I guess my point is, however you show up is perfectly fine. And if you can't show up, if you can't visit a grave site or if you can't visit a loved one's grave, that's okay too. I am coming to realize that, Gabby, my baby, she's not up in heaven judging me because I don't go to her grave site enough. She knows I hope she knows I loved her, because that's another thing. I did not tell her that I loved her when she was alive. I didn't really have the opportunity. So I guess there's probably some guilt there. They say, love is a cure-all. Maybe that's not the right words, but love is very healing. Like when a little kid gets a boo-boo, they ask mom to kiss it and make it better. And obviously the mom's kiss doesn't take the boo-boo away, but it's backed with love, and that goes a long way. So I wonder if I had said I love you that night she was born, would that have changed the outcome? Or was feeling it enough without the... As you're working through stuff like this in your own life, just notice what you feel. Like, notice where any sensations are coming up. For me, for stuff like this, it always is here in my throat. It's just this constant, I don't even think lump is the right word. It's not, it's way bigger than a lump. It's like a big boulder. Like, makes my voice feel all restricted. from last year is still there. Alright, so far so good. Nobody's here, so that's kind of a relief. And I usually just sit here for a minute before I get out of the car. I haven't tapped here before, but I think I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Because I do feel the emotions coming up. So even though I'm feeling all this heaviness in my heart as I'm visiting Gabby's grave, I love and accept how I feel. And even though parts of me want to be here, other parts feel like it's too hard. And I honor all of these parts of me and just allow myself to show up however feels natural. I feel this heaviness in my heart sitting here in next to Gabby's grave. Just breathing. Allowing myself to notice how uncomfortable it feels, how heavy it feels. Just allowing the emotions to be there, not trying to force them down or anything. Okay, calming down. So I'm gonna go ahead and get out of the car here. Got my little flower in. Got it spinning in the wind. This is the part where I don't really usually know what to do. Sometimes I bring a blanket and sit here. So something else I'm trying to do is I've often used tapping before to kind of get rid of emotions, to tap them out, get rid of them, release them. But personally, I find it much more effective and much deeper when I just kind of let myself feel whatever I'm feeling rather than try to make it go away. I think I'm gonna head out here. I wasn't here very long, but I feel okay about that. That's a little chilly. And I'm just glad I came. It's okay. Still have a little bit of a lump, but it's not quite as heavy. It's not quite as big. I know visiting a gravesite for a loved one isn't usually an easy thing to do. And you have your own reasons for it being difficult. And I just wanted to show you how tapping can help with some of the discomfort and some of the pain. Not to get rid of it, but to lighten it a little and to make it a little more bearable. If I'm being honest, it makes me want a glass of wine. But I know that's not actually helpful. It's just a way to stuff down the discomfort. And that's where tapping can help bring it to the surface so that you can honor it and release it naturally. it's really hard to leave because I don't know when I'll be able to come back. Even though I feel guilty for being ready to leave the cemetery. I love and accept myself anyway. And even though it's okay to leave, and I notice this guilt and this sadness coming up, I'm just allowing them to be there. And I'm honoring that it was a really difficult time in my life, and it continues to affect me, which is to be expected. Feeling some guilt and some sadness about leaving this grave. Intellectually, I know that it's okay to leave. But emotionally, it still feels hard because I don't know when I'll be able to come back. And I find myself questioning if I stayed long enough. Just feeling this lump in my throat. Sometimes just wordless tapping is very helpful too. Just tap through. Just tap through and let your thoughts go. Let the emotions come up, let the feelings arise, let the thoughts come up, and just let them be. I hope this helped you see how tapping can be used in everyday life and just on the go, and that you don't need a special setting to use it. It doesn't, you don't need to have the perfect words. You don't even really need to know exactly what's wrong for it to be helpful. Clearly the language that I used applies to myself. But if you wanted to tap along, you could just change the language to reflect, whoever your loved one is and whatever you are feeling. I did notice on the drive to the cemetery some stuff coming up that I hadn't really voiced before, and maybe I didn't fully realize was still there. And it's making me think, it's leading me to think that there might still be some underlying stuff there to work through, which is perfectly normal, perfectly understandable. Some things that I'm noticing are still there are which I'm not upset at them for. I mean, kids are kids. I was a kid. And it's not, I mean, I wasn't the only girl in my high school to get pregnant. And, you know, plenty have been before, plenty have been after. But just that having to deal with being the pregnant girl in high school, and then having to be the girl who lost her baby in high school. Not such a fun time. I'm sure you can imagine. I don't blame anybody or fault anybody for any judgment they passed. I know what kind of person I was. And I was not somebody to sleep around. And that's one of the things that I notice comes up. There's still some anger because they judged me for getting pregnant. But I was with somebody that I loved and trusted. And yet these other girls are sleeping around. And yet I'm the slut. Which was not true. Another thing to mention when you're using tapping is there's no set number of rounds that you have to do for it to be effective. It might take one round, it might take 20 rounds. You know, so in addition to not needing to have the exact right words, you also don't need to do it for a specific amount of time. You don't need to start on a specific point. You don't need to end on a specific point. The more you use it, you know, the more intuitive it becomes. And, you know, I often skip the karate chop point and just start tapping. And something else I do is I used to have a touch of OCD, and it had to be a complete round in order for it to count or whatever. I don't know where that came from. But that's no longer the case. You know, if you're noticing a shift and you're feeling better or feeling lighter, and you know you're in the middle of, you know, maybe you're on the collarbone point and haven't quite made it a full round, it's okay to stop. It still works. So just keep that in mind too. Okay, so all that's left to do is to put my own little flower outside of my house. It's not quite as windy, but I just like that there's one there and there's one here. It's a little sense of closeness.